I told the bartender I was single on girls' night. He later confronted me in the same bar. Hello, Reddits. My name is Anna, and I'm 26 years old. I've been married for 2 years now. I thought I missed my single life. I thought that being married was choking me up slowly. I thought that being married restricted all of my activities, the ones I used to enjoy so well when I was single. But I guess not, because right now I have no idea what to do to stay married. I don't know how exactly I can convince Peter that I've changed and I regret everything and really want to stay. Married to him. I did something really terrible and Peter had caught me. He caught me red-handed and now I am in desperate need of help. I need to know if there's any way to undo my wrongs. I told the bartender at the bar where my girls and I decided to hang out on our girls' night that I was single and something had happened that night between us. But what I didn't know was that Peter was right there in that bar, and he heard everything and also saw me flirting so blatantly with the bartender. He was so angry and he confronted me in that same bar, and things had just taken the worst possible detour, and I really don't know how to get out of this. Before I met Peter, I was that party. Animal who thought life revolves around drinks and having fun with your girlfriends. And we were wild, my friends and I. We met in college and had stayed friends ever since. We even got to work in the same company and rented an apartment together when we started working after school. We were literally the three musketeers. We went to almost every party we were invited to, and we drank and dared each other on most nights. Some nights, we didn't even go home together, and someone or all three of us end up coming home the next morning. Our landlady was always irritated by us, and she would always complain bitterly about our habits of disturbing the building with knocks in the morning whenever we forget our individual keys to the apartment. That was how wild we were, and I thought of it as fun. The life we led was fun, and it was pretty cool until I met Peter. When I first met Peter, the idea that clicked in my head was that he could be my insurance. My parents had invited me, actually forced me to come home that weekend. Apparently, it was their friend's child's wedding and they wanted me to attend with them. I knew it was an attempt on their part to try and fix me with any viable male, and I refused at first, but they managed to guilt-trip me into showing up. I met Peter at that party. He wasn't like any of the guys I've ever met. Very handsome, but didn't even know how to flirt properly. He is a doctor and was single, and I got all that information from the bride, who happened to be one of the girls I went to high school with. Although much older than me, Peter hadn't been married before, and according to her, he had tons of money because of his very rich parents. I got really interested quickly, and I made sure to approach him at the party. We got talking, and I made. Sure, I said all the right things and gave out all the right vibes. I knew Peter was interested in me from the way he kept talking to me and blushing. It felt like I was dealing with a schoolboy and not a man who was 15 years older than me. We exchanged contacts that day, and we started talking. I hid the fact that I was a party animal from Peter. I didn't want him to take me as an unserious type, especially when I realized what his profession was. So I made myself into this career-oriented woman who is also family-oriented and would love to settle quickly, and Peter bought it. We started dating weeks after meeting, and within 5 months of being together, Peter proposed to me. I was so happy because I felt that was all I needed to be settled in life. Immediately after we got married, I quit my job. I told Peter it was only because I wanted to be a stay-at-home wife and mother, and Peter had been proud of my decision. But that was just a lie. I didn't want to have to work. I mean, who needed to work when your husband was heir to a vast wealth his father had, accumulated over the years? In fact, with that money and the properties that Peter's father had, he didn't ever have to work a day in his life. And yet there he was, still slaving around in the hospital. He's a resident doctor at the hospital he worked in and was always needed at the hospital. And I didn't mind at first. I didn't mind that he was always so busy, because when he did have time for me, he was always so caring and loving with me. I enjoyed being married to Peter for the first year. I did nothing but go out with my friends and shop till we dropped, then sneak out to parties whenever Peter had to work overnight. I was having fun being a wife, and it was pretty cool having all that access to all that money. But that quickly went sideways after a year. Peter decided to take the offer of the hospital he worked in to be a director, so he didn't have to work as much. He could delegate to other residential doctors and only had to work with VIP patients. So that meant he got to spend lots of time at home and didn't work as much anymore. The first month passed with me being able to pretend successfully that I enjoyed staying at home and I enjoyed spending time with him. But at the end of the second month, I was losing my mind already. Peter didn't know how to have fun. His idea of fun was staying indoors and watching some documentation on surgical procedures. Although he allowed me to choose movies that we would watch together, it was still boring staying at home. I couldn't even drink because Peter frowned against alcohol and never took any. Sometimes, when I'm able to convince him to step out of the house, we end up in some expensive restaurant with the view of the sea and just us in the private sector of the restaurant. It's meant to be romantic, but it was just so boring. I couldn't do the things I loved doing, and the only time I got to relax was with my girls, who eventually grew busy on weekends and didn't have my time anymore. So I was stuck with a husband who was bent on spending time together, but didn't even know how to have fun. It was so frustrating. Another part that made me even more frustrated was despite the fact that he didn't have to work so much at the hospital, Peter had to attend all these seminars of medicine, and he was always taking me along with him to them. It was annoying that most people there literally only spoke in some sort of language that always sounded entirely different from English, even though it was. They were always discussing some new medicine or how to improve some health thing, and I always turned out to be the alien in their midst when I couldn't even contribute to anything they had to say. Peter didn't notice. Of course, I was the perfect actress, acting like I was enjoying myself sipping wine slowly instead of drinking beer at clubs and dancing away my sorrow or flirting with some hot guy at the club. It was slowly eating me inside out. I complained about this to my girls, and they only just laughed it off. They considered me lucky for having a perfect man like Peter as my husband. They didn't understand what it was like having to pretend to be prim and proper with him all the time. At the beginning of our relationship, I had even lied about my favorite food because I felt saying something as shrewd as pizza being your favorite food would sound absurd, especially when you're trying hard to maintain a perfect figure as you claim to be. So I had to eat all those weird vegetables all the time to keep up my image in front of him. I think he knew I was lying. He was doing everything to make me break, so I would stop putting up my front. Because how had he suspected me enough to trace me to that bar on that day when there was nothing, absolutely nothing, no matter how hard I think of it, to track my lies? I just think that he knew and tried everything until I finally exposed everything and he caught me red-handed. He set a bait and I bit it hook, line, and sinker. I couldn't hold it in anymore by the 3rd month, so I started looking for ways to have fun. Sneaking around the house to have the alcohol I safely kept in the guest room, and paying the housekeeper to keep quiet about it, and also to help me get the drinks whenever I exhausted the ones I have. I did it at night when Peter was finally asleep so he wouldn't suspect me, but even that after a month got tiring. I wanted to have fun. I was tired of being stuck doing the same thing over and over again. Luckily, Peter had to travel for a month for some work reason. I was happy to see him go. I was supposed to go with him, but I feigned sickness just so I didn't have to travel with him, and Peter had gone alone, leaving me all by myself. It meant I had the whole time to myself to do whatever I wanted, and I did. I partied hard again with my friends. We went out almost all the time, and when they couldn't go because of work, I went on their behalf. I drank and flirted with a lot of men at those clubs. I never did sleep with any of them at first. It was all just games, but then a mistake had happened one night when I was too drunk. I only remember vaguely that the man I slept with had dragged me to a hotel, and I was too drunk to resist. I only woke up naked in bed alone. The guy who I didn't even remember what he looked like had left, and the snake didn't even pay for the hotel room, and I had to pay before I left there. Even though I barely remembered what happened between the stranger and I felt strangely curious to know what it would be like to sleep with men randomly again. It was then I started sleeping with random men again. It wasn't every time. It had just been with 3 or 4 different men, excluding the first guy I slept with. I thought of it as fun, having stringless sex with no attachment of any sort. If I slept with a man tonight, if he intrigued me enough to tempt me to have sex, I only did it once and didn't go back for a repeat. I was married, and I didn't want anything coming back to bite me. But of course they didn't know that, probably because I didn't even have my rings on my finger whenever I went out to the club. Peter ended up spending more than a month on his trip. He had to travel to another place for some good work. Apparently, he wanted to help reach out to places where there was little or no medical attention there, and that required a lot more than the 1 month he was prepared for. So I was left alone to do whatever I wanted. I knew that Peter could easily get a hold of my financial record and find out exactly what I've been up to. So I created different false accounts under different names. With the help of a friend, and I would split the money into those accounts which I used to fund my lifestyle. Peter thought those accounts were for charity, because of how my friend had helped me falsify the names. So to Peter, I was only sending money mostly to charitable foundations. I also started paying for a cooking class that I never attended, just to throw him off the scent of what I was really doing. I didn't want him curious about what I spent my time doing. Peter would call me every day to ask about my cooking class and tell me about his work, which usually bored me, but I pretended it didn't. I did perfectly execute the role of a perfect wife, and I didn't ever think that Peter would suspect me. But I was so wrong. Peter finally came back home after almost 3 months of being in a different state. It meant saying goodbye to my lifestyle again and pretending again. It was frustrating, but I did my part as usual. And then that day, I told Peter that my friends invited me out just to get out of dinner with his mom. I told him I had already promised to be there because I didn't hang out with them a lot after we got married. I didn't want to be in the same room as his mother because the woman clearly disapproved of me. Yes, Peter's mother never really liked me from the beginning, and she never made any effort to hide that fact, but she couldn't go against her only son when he brought me home and introduced me as his fiancé, and had eventually gotten married to me. Several times whenever she did visit, she found things to complain about me to Peter, and it was pretty exhausting trying to pretend with Peter and also doing the same with her too. So I told Peter that I had a girls' night out with my friends, and I couldn't get out of it without hurting their feelings, and surprisingly, Peter had agreed. He let me go without saying much. I was really happy, and it was only after he left the house that morning for work that I really did call my friends and invited them for a night out, which they gladly agreed to. So with that plan set in place, I found a perfect place to hang out with my friends. A new bar that just opened an hour drive, away from the house. It was perfect because it was a small one and barely noticeable, especially to someone like Peter who didn't go out much. A bar like that would probably be insignificant, and he would have dismissed it if he hadn't followed me there. That day came, and I saw Peter off to his car inside the garage when he was leaving for his mother's place, which was about 4 to 5 hours' drive from our house. I even kissed him goodbye and told him to extend my greetings and regrets to his mom for not showing up. I watched him drive away before I went back in. It wasn't until another 2 hours before I left the house in my new dress that I just got a day before that day. There was nothing that could have made me suspicious that Peter was going to catch on or even suspect me enough to follow me. He had been the same person he always was with me, cool, loving, and caring. There was nothing in his behavior to show me that he suspected me. He still even made love to me the night before that day, so there really was nothing to pinpoint that he had caught on. I arrived at the bar before my friends and ordered our drinks, which arrived before they did. But then one of our friends had announced that she couldn't drink anymore because she was pregnant. It was shocking, and even though I was thrilled for her, I was envious too. I would have had a baby by then if I set my mind on it. Or if I wasn't using the birth control pill I was secretly taking behind Peter's back so I didn't get pregnant. But I shrugged it off as soon as the thought came into my head. Who wanted to be saddled with a baby at such a young age? I congratulated her especially. After she told us that the baby's father was willing to take responsibility and marry her, she told us she might get busy with the wedding preparations and might not see us for a while, which was why she took my offer to come out that night. I teased her that she was probably going to regret giving up alcohol and would be too swollen in a few months to be admired by another male. We laughed it off, and while my other friend and I drank, she just sipped her orange juice. But while my friends kept talking and telling me about the recent happenings in their life, I got distracted. Like really distracted by the bartender. He was really tall and handsome and didn't look like he belonged behind that bar, and I noticed him because he kept staring at me as if he was willing for me to come to him. I ignored him at first and tried to concentrate on the discussion my friends were arguing about the cost of weddings. But then I guessed they had noticed how distracted I was, and then by who. My friends had teased me by warning me with a joke to remind me of my married status. But I didn't mind all that. I kept staring at the bartender who was also checking me out. Then my friends had dared me to walk up to him and see whether I still had my skills of seducing men. Back when we were in college, we always dared ourselves on stuff like that. I was mostly known to be the queen of dares because I usually won anything that had to do with seducing a man or getting him to part with his number, or perhaps even convincing him to have a quick round of sex in any secluded spaces and parties. And I did that even after college until I got married to Peter. So I took the challenge and I walked over to the bartender who was smiling at me now. I flirted with him and when he asked if I was single, I showed him my fingers jokingly that he should point out the rings. Clearly pleased that I was single, he asked me if I wanted to get out back with him for sex, and I agreed. It was the usual for me, and I remember looking back at my friends and winking at them before following the bartender to the back. We wasted no time. There were no words needed between us. We already said all that needed to be said with our eyes back when I was still sitting with my friends. So when he pushed me against the wall, I helped him pull down my short shirt and panties aside so he could slam right into me. I thought of it as fun and was even moaning loudly from the aggressive way he was handling me. Too involved in what he was doing to me to notice someone standing right there in the back with us. I was too caught up in that moment to realize that Peter had followed us to the back and was looking at me having sex against the wall in a storage room. It was only when the bartender paused and asked who it was that I turned and noticed him. I was so shocked, and I pushed the bartender away while trying to push up my skirt and panties to follow Peter outside. I called him and tried holding on to him, but Peter had pushed my hands away. The expression on his face was unreadable, and then he asked me how long I had been doing it for. He asked me how long I had been going around clubs and bars sleeping with every man I meet. I tried to deny it. I tried to beg him to wait till we got home. We were already getting lots of attention, and I was feeling really ashamed and embarrassed, but Peter wouldn't hear me out. He told me that he followed me and had been in the bar long enough to watch me flirt with the bartender, tell him I was single when I was clearly married, and he watched me go out through the back with him and still saw me sleeping with a man I had only met minutes ago, forgetting that I was married. He told me not to come home because I won't be able to get in, and he told me that he had evidence. He had clearly recorded my indiscretions, and he told me right there in the bar, with those many people that suddenly tripled since Peter started talking, that he was going to make sure I suffer greatly for lying and cheating on him, and then he left. It was only after he left that I noticed that my friends were no longer there. They left me there and didn't even bother to warn me when they must have seen Peter follow me. I left that bar very embarrassed and ashamed of myself. True to Peter's words when he had threatened me never to show my face around his house again, I couldn't go into the house. He locked the door, and despite all my pleas for him to open the door and hear me out, he wouldn't respond. I didn't have anywhere to sleep that night, and I ended up sleeping in the garage. My friends weren't picking my calls, and I knew it was deliberate. They had left me to face the consequences of my own actions. The next morning, Peter left the house and almost crushed my feet if I hadn't jumped out of the way when I kept trying to stop him from leaving and to hear me out. I had to get somewhere to stay, and my stay at the hotel I stayed for 2 days ran out quickly. Peter had my account blocked. And the crazy thing was, all the money I had put in the other accounts was so small that it barely had enough to take me home to my parents. My life had overturned in those 2 days, though. Someone had apparently made a video of Peter confronting me in that bar because it was uploaded online. The person had probably made the video from the back because Peter's face wasn't obvious, but mine was clear. Over the last week, I've had people staring at me pointedly. I've had people whispering about me and going as far as crossing to the other end of the road just to avoid walking on the same path as me. The stigmatization just keeps getting worse each day. It's even worse because I'm staying back with my parents and therefore in the hometown I grew up in. Having people you've known all your life avoid you like a plague is just awful. My house isn't any better. My parents barely speak to me. They ignore me around the house, and it makes the whole thing hurt even more. My siblings aren't any better. My older sister keeps insisting that my parents throw me out of the house so I could go deal with my situation somewhere else because she didn't want our parents suffering because of me. It's the truth no matter how hurtful it is, knowing that your family also wants nothing to do with you because of your actions. I know it's only a matter of time before they get tired of me living in their home and throw me out, especially after the embarrassment I've managed to cause them with my despicable act. I barely have any clothes to wear. Peter didn't let me in the house to pick up anything, and the only thing he sent was that email with divorce papers, written boldly on it. I've called and texted him several times now, but Peter wouldn't even respond to any of them. My friends have all blocked me on social media. One of them, the one who is pregnant, texted me and told me that she couldn't bear to have a bad image, especially by being associated with me that close to her wedding, and also because of her unborn baby. The other one didn't even bother with any explanations. She had just blocked my number and deleted all of our pictures together on her social media page. It was clear what they thought of me, and it's just awful, and I don't know what to do. All I know right now, having had nothing else but more than enough torturing time to think about my actions and its consequences, I've realized just how much I love Peter. I know you might not believe me and think that I'm saying this as a plot to get back with him, but it's the truth. I love Peter so much, and I regret doing all the things I did to him. I really wish there was a second chance to right my Wrongs. I wish there is something, anything at all that I can do to get Peter to forgive me and accept me back. I do not want to accept that we're done. I desperately want to believe that Peter is just mad at me, and that if I do something differently, he'll forgive me and give me a second chance. I want to believe that if I give him a reason to believe that I'm changed, he'll accept me back, and I promise that it's just this once. I will never do anything to hurt him again. I promise to be that wife he needs and not to pretend with him anymore. I just really want Peter back desperately. The problem is just that I don't know what I have to do to get him to forgive me or put behind him the things that I've done. Please, guys, you have to help me. How do I get Peter to forgive me? Update. Hello, Reddits. It's been horrible. Totally and absolutely horrible to live like this. I've always known that life wasn't fair in the game, but I didn't think it would be to this extent. But then again, I don't even have the right to think of life as being unfair when I all but put myself in this mess. All life did was throw me a few baits, which I ended up biting and now suffering dearly for. I never knew that things could end up like this. I thought that after a few weeks, the gossip would die down. That maybe I could go back to my normal life. That maybe everything will be fine. I even managed to convince myself to hope that Peter will forgive me, that he will overlook everything, see that I've suffered enough for my sins and come back for me. But not only has my hope been squashed, I've also ended up becoming a permanent object of ridicule everywhere I look. In the town, I'm that wayward girl who couldn't even keep a marriage. I'm that girl who has become an example not to become anything like. I've become that girl who every elderly person snorts when they see, and young girls stare at and whisper about when I walk past. On the internet, every day some new blogger finds some interesting part of that particular video to comment on. Someone had even managed to obtain the CCTV footage of the bartender and I in the storage room and posted it too. It's so terrible being tagged and attacked everywhere on social media, especially without them knowing my full story. They keep attacking me from everywhere. It wouldn't even matter if they did know the full story, because at the end of the day, maybe it would. Have gotten even more worse. Because you guys here whom I bore my heart to think of me no differently. You guys have found joy in insulting and throwing cruel comments on my post. You've made me feel even more awful and irritated with myself. You've not only squashed my hope of getting help with getting back with Peter, but also managed to make me look like a delusional madwoman for thinking I could be pitied if I explained everything that really did happen. It's horrible having to deal with so much hatred coming at me all at once. It's so choking. I find it so difficult to stay afloat now. I feel like I'm drowning under the weight of my own sins. There's also the fact that despite my numerous attempts to get Peter to forgive me, I have received nothing but more anger and hatred from him. I've called so many times. I've texted several times too, trying to explain myself and begging for a second chance, but I got nothing. Just more pressure. Especially from Peter's mother to sign the divorce papers, and when I refused to, I had been summoned to court. And with all that evidence against me and no lawyer to even plead my case, it was easy for the old female judge who was obviously married, if the shiny rings on her fingers were anything to go by, to approve of the divorce. I got nothing in the end. Peter's lawyer made sure I got nothing for the divorce settlement. I was left as bare as I had come into the marriage. As if that isn't also enough, I got home that day from the court after crying my eyes out on the way home to meet my little bag outside the door. My parents had finally made up their minds. They didn't want to be involved in my mess any longer. They told me they helped me rent a room farther from the town so I could stay there and gather myself. They didn't want me to call or speak to them again. I knew they were merely obeying my sister's wishes, who had of course been the only useful daughter they had. I had always been the bag egg. I never once sent my parents money, even after marrying a wealthy man like Peter. I knew Peter always sent them money every month, so I never bothered adding mine, and had instead spent it on frivolous things. I know how horrible I am now, and words can really not express just how terrible I feel about my actions. I wish I had the chance to undo my wrongs. I wish I got the second chance that I desperately wished for. Peter had never done anything to me to deserve what I did. He gave me everything I could ever ask for, and yet I kept missing an old life that I should never have had. A life that I should have thrown away. I wish I had a chance to start over again. So I got the chance to tell Peter everything, the truth this time, about me. How I liked pizza, and not that weird food with too many. Vegetables in it. How I never was a career woman and will never be. How I loved having fun and partying instead of the spotless image I tried to create. Maybe Peter would have accepted me for me. Maybe he still would have loved me regardless. Maybe he would never have tried to change me. Not that he ever tried to. I did that myself. Tried to change myself into someone I never was. And I regret everything so much. I regret never trying to know Peter and love and cherish him as he is. First, regret thinking I could outsmart him. Because all I've ended up with are just regrets and more regrets, which seem to be growing into a huge dump by the day. Stuck in my new room, which is barely large enough for anything other than a storage room, I realize just how much I've lost with just a single decision of mine. I'm only now left to imagine just how it would be if I had never taken those birth control pills. Maybe I'll be a mother of Peter's baby by now. Maybe he wouldn't have been able to discard me the way he has now because I will have a connection between us. Our child. All I can think of now is how beautiful or handsome our baby would have turned out to be. Maybe the child will have Peter's face and his beautiful hair and perhaps his height and only my eyes. But all I can now is imagine just how perfect things would have been in my life if I hadn't been so bent on ruining everything. I'm barely hanging on. I'm barely surviving. It's so draining having to live like this, knowing that I will never get to see Peter again. It's painful thinking of the fact that Peter will move on or already has. It's choking thinking that he will find someone new, someone entirely different. Someone who is not a liar and a cheat like me. Someone who will love him and cherish him in the way that I haven't ever done. Someone who wouldn't find it within themselves to lie and pretend throughout their relationship like I had. Someone who didn't try to marry him for money. Someone who isn't as frivolous as I was and will regardless of. Whether he has money or not, love him like he is the only one in the world. Now that I have no one who cares or loves me anymore, I realize just how lonely life is. It's scary just how much you can go from meaning so much to others to meaning nothing at all. In this cold, empty apartment of mine, where I have nothing but myself to keep me company. Where it's so silent that if a pin had dropped, it would probably be audible. The only noise is the ones in my head and in my heart from all these niggling thoughts I keep having. The only fun I have is when I sleep, dreaming about the life I could be living right now in the arms of the man I love, and it being the two of us against the world. But even that has quickly changed to nightmares these past few days. It had changed to dreams of that day when I had seen Peter staring in anger at me being held against the wall and moaning so loudly. I wish there was some way to undo this. I wish there was a way to turn things around or perhaps a time machine, but it's only clear that those are just my wishful thinking. This is my life now. I have to learn to live with myself despite how horrifying that sounds. This is my last post here, guys. Not that you guys care anyways. I know you guys want to hear nothing about me again, and I'm obeying that request right now. I initially thought coming here and trying to express myself would relieve me of my pains, but I guess not. Goodbye, guys.